Part 1: The Vanishing. The night was quiet in Seoul. Admiral Park sat in his office on the 47th floor of the Korean Naval Space Command building. He was 58 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many strange things in space, but nothing had prepared him for what was happening now. His communication screen flashed red. Another report, another impossible reading. "Admiral," said the young officer on screen, "the seismic stations in the Pacific are showing activity again. But, sir, it makes no sense. The readings are coming from too deep, deeper than any earthquake should be." Park leaned forward. "How deep?" "Almost 40 kilometers, sir. And it is not just one location. We are getting the same readings from under the Himalayas, the Sahara Desert, the Amazon rainforest. Everywhere." The admiral felt something cold move through his chest. He had been in the military for 35 years. He had commanded ships that traveled between planets. He had seen alien species and walked on distant moons. But this feeling was different. This felt like the world was about to change forever. "Keep monitoring," he said. "Report anything new immediately." He ended the call and walked to his window. Seoul spread out below him, millions of lights glittering in the darkness. Somewhere out there, 8 billion people were going about their lives, sleeping, working, loving. None of them knew what was coming. Park did not know either, but he could feel it. 6,000 kilometers away in Geneva, Doctor was working late in her laboratory. She was 34 years old, who studied alien life forms. Her job was to understand how life worked on other worlds. Tonight, she was examining samples from a moon called Europa 7. But her mind was not on her work. Something felt wrong. She looked up from her microscope and noticed her colleague, Dr. Weber, standing near the door. He was not moving. He was just standing there, staring at nothing. Dr. Weber called out, "Are you okay?" He did not answer. Instead, he turned and walked out of the laboratory. His movements were slow and calm, like someone walking in a dream. Felt a chill run down her spine. She stood up and followed him into the hallway. What she saw made her stop breathing. Dozens of people were walking through the corridor. Scientists, security guards, cleaning staff. All of them moved in the same direction, toward the building's main exit. Their faces were blank. Their eyes were empty. No one spoke. No one looked at each other. "What is happening?" whispered. She grabbed the arm of a passing researcher. "Dr. Santos, where are you going?" The woman did not respond. She gently pulled her arm free and continued walking. Ran to a window and looked outside. The streets of Geneva were filled with people. Thousands of them, all walking in perfect silence. Cars had stopped. Buses had emptied. Everyone was moving toward some invisible destination. And then realized something that made her heart nearly stop. She was the only one not walking. High above Earth in the darkness of space, a small observation station floated silently. It was called Sentinel 77, and it belonged to the Galactic Coalition. Inside, an officer named sat at his monitoring console, watching Earth turn slowly below. They were a tall species with pale blue skin and large eyes. They had been watching Earth for 200 years, ever since humans first sent radio signals into space. The Coalition considered humans a young species, primitive and interesting but not important. His job was boring. Nothing ever happened on Earth that mattered to the galaxy. Until tonight. His sensors began screaming warnings, jumped in his seat and stared at his screens. Something was happening on the planet below. Massive energy signatures were appearing everywhere, under the oceans, beneath the mountains, inside the deserts. "This is impossible," said to himself. He activated his long-range cameras and zoomed in on the Pacific Ocean. What he saw made his blood freeze. The ocean was opening. A massive section of water was pushing aside as if something enormous was rising from the depths. And then he saw it. A ship, but not like any ship had ever seen. It was black and silver, shaped like a teardrop, and it was at least 30 kilometers long. The ship rose slowly from the ocean, water pouring off its surface like a waterfall. It made no sound. It moved with perfect grace, and it was just one of many. Sensors counted them as they rose: 100, 1,000, 10,000. The numbers kept climbing. Ships were emerging from every continent, every ocean, every hidden place on Earth. Some were small, only a few hundred meters. Others were giants, larger than anything the coalition had ever built. When the count stopped, could not believe what he was seeing. 500,000 ships. They rose into the sky and took positions around Earth, forming a perfect geometric pattern. The planet looked like it was surrounded by a shell of metal and light. His hands were shaking as he opened a communication channel to Coalition Command. "This is Sentinel-77, he said, his voice barely steady. "Emergency report. Earth has just deployed a fleet of 500,000 vessels. Origin unknown. Technology unknown. I repeat, this is not a drill. Something is happening on Earth." He paused, watching the impossible fleet through his window. "And I think the humans are gone." It took 12 hours for all 8 billion humans to vanish. No one saw where they went. No one found any bodies. They simply walked to designated locations and disappeared as if they had never existed. The cities fell silent. The factories stopped. The cars sat empty on the roads. Dogs howled in abandoned houses. Birds sang to no one. And then the fleet moved. The 500,000 ships shifted formation, creating a pattern that hurt to look at. Space itself seemed to bend around them. Light twisted. Stars flickered. Watched from Sentinel-77 as the ships did something impossible. They folded space. One moment the fleet surrounded Earth. The next moment it was gone. No engine burn. No hyperspace jump. The ship simply stopped existing in one place and started existing somewhere else. The transition took less than a second. And when it was over, Earth floated alone in the darkness, a silent blue marble with no one left to call it home. Sat in his station, staring at the empty space where 500,000 ships had been. His hands were still shaking. His mind was trying to understand what he had just witnessed. The humans were gone. They had taken ships that no one knew existed, ships built with technology that made coalition science look like children's toys. And no one in the galaxy knew where they went. Slowly reached for his console and began writing his report. He did not know what words to use. How do you explain that a species everyone thought was primitive had just revealed itself to be something else entirely? He looked down at Earth one more time. The planet was beautiful in its silence. Empty cities glittered on the night side. Ocean waves moved with no one to watch them. Somewhere in the darkness of space, 500,000 ships carried 8 billion humans toward an unknown destination, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The vanishing had begun. Part 2: The Galactic Panic. 3 days after Earth went silent, the Galactic Coalition called an emergency meeting. It was the first time in 400 years that all member species had gathered at once. The situation was that serious. The Assembly Hall on Prime was the largest building in the known galaxy. It could hold representatives from 4,000 different species, and today every seat was filled. The air was thick with tension. Fear hung over the room like a dark cloud. High Arbiter of the stood at the central platform. He was old, even by standards, with rough gray skin and 6 arms that moved nervously as he spoke. They were known for their calm wisdom, but today even could not hide his fear. 3 days ago, he began, his voice echoing through the massive hall, the species known as humans disappeared from there. All 8 billion of them. At the same moment, 500,000 vessels rose from hidden locations across Earth and left the system. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Representatives whispered to each other in 100 different languages. We believed humans were a young species, continued, primitive, contained to a single world. We watched them for 2 centuries and saw nothing that concerned us. We were wrong. He pressed a button and a holographic image appeared above the platform. It showed one of the ships that had risen from Earth. The design was unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. Smooth lines, no visible engines, no weapons ports, just pure, elegant power. Our scientists have analyzed these vessels using long-range sensors. Their technology is beyond our understanding. But more importantly, our historians have made a discovery that changes everything. The hall fell completely silent. These ships are old, said. Very old. Based on the materials and energy signatures, we estimate they were built at least 800,000 years ago. That is before the discovered fire, before the crawled out of our oceans, before any species in this room existed as intelligent life. The silence broke into chaos. Representatives shouted questions. Some demanded explanations. Others simply sat in shock, trying to understand what they had just heard. Commander, head of Galactic Security, rose from her seat and called for order. She was a tall female from a warrior species called the, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. We need to focus, she said. The question is not where these ships came from. The question is where they went, and what the humans plan to do with them. How do we find ships that can fold space? Someone shouted from the crowd. Our best tracking systems cannot follow them. Then we search every system, replied. We send scouts to every corner of the galaxy. 500,000 ships cannot hide forever. But even as she spoke, everyone in the room knew the truth. They were not prepared for this. They had spent centuries believing they understood the galaxy. Now they realized they understood nothing. While the Coalition argued, a small research ship landed on Earth. It was the first vessel to touch the planet since the vanishing. Inside were 6 scientists from different species, sent to investigate what had happened. Among them was a young woman named Park. Was 26 years old with black hair and bright eyes that held a deep sadness. She was a hybrid, the daughter of a human father and a mother. Such children were rare, the result of advanced genetic science that few species could perform. Had grown up on Prime, never quite fitting in with either world. When the vanishing happened, she had been off-planet, studying at a Coalition university. Now she was the only human left in the known galaxy. The ship landed in what used to be Seoul, stepped onto the empty streets and felt her heart break. She had visited this city once as a child with her father. She remembered the crowds, the noise, the life that filled every corner. Now there was only silence. Called Doctor, a scientist who led the team. We are detecting unusual energy readings from beneath the city, underground. Nodded and followed the team through the abandoned streets. They passed empty cars and dark buildings. Clothes lay on the sidewalks, dropped by people who no longer existed. It was like the entire city had taken a breath and never exhaled. The energy readings led them to an old district near the mountains. There, hidden behind an abandoned temple, they found a door. It was made of metal that none of them recognized, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when viewed directly. These symbols, whispered, I have seen them before. Where? Doctor asked. Touched the door gently. In my dreams. When I was a child, I used to dream about doors like this. My father told me they were just nightmares, but they felt so real. The door recognized her touch. It slid open without a sound, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. The team activated their lights and went down. The stairs went deep, much deeper than any normal building. After 15 minutes of walking, they reached a chamber. What they found inside changed everything. The chamber was massive, carved from solid rock. The walls were covered with the same shifting symbols as the door. In the center stood a pillar of light, gently pulsing like a heartbeat. and on the far wall, written in letters 3 meters tall, was a message. It was written in human language: English, Korean, Chinese, Arabic, every major language of Earth, all saying the same thing. "We will return when the stars are ready. Watch for the signal." Below the message was a countdown, numbers that slowly decreased, second by second. Doctor scanned the chamber with his equipment. "This chamber is old, incredibly old. My readings suggest it was built over 800,000 years ago, the same age as the ships." Stared at the countdown. She did not understand what was happening. She did not know why she was the only human left, or what the signal meant, or why the numbers were counting down. But she felt something stirring inside her, something that had been sleeping her whole life. "What were you?" she whispered to the empty chamber. "What were we?" The light in the pillar pulsed brighter for a moment, as if answering. Back on Prime, the coalition continued to debate. Some wanted to prepare for war. Others wanted to send peace envoys. A few suggested ignoring the situation entirely, hoping the humans would never return. But Commander knew better. She had spent her whole life studying military strategy. She understood power, and she understood threats. What she had seen in reports from Sentinel-77 told her one simple truth. If the humans wanted to destroy the coalition, they could do it. 500,000 ships with technology 800,000 years more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. There would be no war. There would only be extinction. So the question was not whether the coalition could fight the humans. The question was what the humans wanted, and that was something no one could answer. Late that night, stood alone in her office, looking out at the lights of Prime. Billions of beings lived on this world, going about their lives, unaware of how close they were to something they could not understand. Her communication device beeped. It was a message from the research team on Earth. She read the report about the underground chamber, about the message, about the countdown. "Watch for the signal," she repeated quietly. Outside her window, the stars shone peacefully. Somewhere out there, 500,000 ships carried 8 billion humans toward a destination unknown, and the countdown continued, second by second, moving towards something that would change the galaxy forever. Did not know what was coming, but she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had been asleep for too long, and now it was about to wake up. Part 3: The Forgotten Archives. 2 months had passed since the vanishing. The galaxy was still in chaos. Coalition patrols searched every system for signs of the human fleet. They found nothing. The ships had simply disappeared as if they had never existed. Dr. Park spent those 2 months studying the chamber beneath Sol. She learned to read some of the shifting symbols on the walls. They were not just decoration. They were a language older than anything she had ever seen, and they told a story. But the story was incomplete. The chamber held only fragments, pieces of a much larger puzzle. If wanted to understand what was happening, she needed to find the rest. That search led her to They were the oldest living species in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when most other species were still learning to make fire. They kept records of everything, stored in vast libraries that stretched across entire continents. If anyone knew the truth about the humans, it would be them. Traveled to with a small team, including Captain 1 of the fleet. One was young for a captain, only 40 years old, with dark gray skin and 4 strong arms. He had volunteered to escort after reading her reports from Earth. Something about the mystery had captured his attention. "You really think that will help us?" he asked as their ship approached the planet. "They do not share their knowledge easily." "They will have to," replied. "Whatever is happening, it affects them too. The countdown in that chamber is still running. When it reaches 0, something will happen, something big." One nodded slowly. "And you believe to know what that something is." Looked out at the approaching planet. Was covered in forests that glowed with soft blue light. Beautiful and ancient, like the species that lived there. I believe they know more than they have ever told anyone, she said. They did not welcome visitors, but they could not refuse a formal request from the coalition, especially one that concerned the safety of all species. So when and her team arrived, they were met by a representative who led them to the central city. They were strange beings. They had no solid bodies, only shapes made of flowing light that changed constantly. They communicated through thoughts and emotions rather than words. Being near them felt like standing in a warm rain of ideas. The representative led them to a building that was older than most civilizations. Inside, sitting on a throne of crystal, was Grandmother Vass. Grandmother Vass was the oldest alive. No one knew exactly how old she was. Some said she had been born before the galaxy had intelligent life. Others said she remembered the birth of stars. Whatever the truth, her presence filled the room with weight and power. "You seek knowledge," Grandmother Vass said. Her voice was not sound but feeling, entering mind directly. "You want to know about the species called humans." "Yes," said, "I need to understand what is happening. What were we? What are we becoming?" Grandmother Vass was silent for a long moment. The light that formed her body flickered and changed colors, shifting through emotions that could not name. "Come," the old finally said. "I will show you what we have kept hidden for 800,000 years." The forbidden archives were located deep beneath the surface of. No outsider had ever been allowed inside. But Grandmother Vass led through sealed doors and ancient tunnels, past guards who had stood watch for longer than most species had existed. The archive itself was a single massive room filled with crystals. Each crystal contained memories, recorded directly from the minds of those who had lived them. Billions of years of history, stored in perfect clarity. Grandmother Vass touched one of the crystals, and images flooded its mind. She saw the galaxy as it was 900,000 years ago, empty, lifeless, a vast darkness filled with dead rocks and cold stars. And then she saw them. Ships, millions of ships traveling between the stars, building, creating, seeding life on barren worlds. These were not ships or coalition ships. They were something else entirely. "We called them the architects," Grandmother Vass said. "They were the first intelligent species in the galaxy. They came from a place beyond our records, perhaps from another galaxy entirely, and they created everything." The images continued. Watched the architects build hyperspace gates that connected distant stars. She saw them design the defense networks that protected young civilizations from cosmic dangers. She saw them create the star maps that every species still uses today. The architects were not gods. They were scientists, engineers, artists. They built the galaxy the way a gardener builds a garden, with patience and care and love. And then saw their faces. Her breath stopped. Her heart seemed to freeze in her chest. The architects looked exactly like humans. "No," she whispered, "that is not possible." "It is the truth," Grandmother Vass said. "The species you called humans were never native to Earth. They were the architects. 900,000 years ago, they came to your planet and placed themselves in deliberate sleep. They erased their own memories. They became primitive. They forgot everything they were." His mind was spinning. But why? Why would anyone do that? Grandmother Vass's light turned dark, almost black. Felt fear radiating from the ancient being. "Because they were running from something," Grandmother Vass said. "Something they had created by accident during their experiments. Something that should not exist." The crystals showed new images. Darkness. Not the darkness of space, but something worse. A void that consumed everything it touched. Stars, planets, light itself. Reality being unmade piece by piece. "They called it the unmaking," Grandmother Vass said. "It is the opposite of existence. The architects accidentally opened a door to it during their research. They managed to contain it behind a barrier of pure energy, but maintaining that barrier required constant attention." So they stayed awake to keep it contained, said slowly, beginning to understand. But eventually they wanted to rest. They wanted more than rest. They wanted to start over, to see if they could become something better, so they designed a plan. They would sleep for hundreds of thousands of years, protected by the barrier they had built. When they woke, they would be different, changed by the experience of growing up again from nothing. And the barrier. The barrier was designed to hold for exactly as long as they slept. When it began to fail, the signal would wake them. Felt cold wash over her. The countdown in the chamber, that is the barrier failing. Yes, Grandmother Vass confirmed. The unmaking is returning. The architects knew it would happen eventually. That is why they designed their awakening. They are the only ones who can rebuild the barrier. Outside the archives, his communication device suddenly screamed with alerts. She pulled it out and saw dozens of emergency messages from Captain One. Dr. Park, his voice came through, filled with fear. Coalition border stations are going dark. Something is happening at the edge of the galaxy. Something bad. Looked at Grandmother Vass. The ancient's light was flickering rapidly, showing patterns of deep terror. It begins, Grandmother Vass said. The outer silence has started. The unmaking has broken through. Ran from the archives, her mind filled with terrible knowledge. Somewhere out there, reality itself was dying, and the only ones who could stop it were the humans who had disappeared. She just hoped they would return in time. Part 4, The Outer Silence. 5 months had passed since the vanishing. The galaxy was no longer just afraid, it was dying. Commander stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Shield, watching her screens fill with reports of destruction. Border stations silent, patrol ships missing, entire colonies gone without a trace. Every day the darkness grew closer. She had brought the largest fleet the Coalition had ever assembled to the Galactic Rim. 3,000 warships from 50 different species, the most powerful weapons ever created. All of them pointed at an enemy they could not see. "Commander," said her tactical officer, "we are approaching the last known position of Station Outreach 7. On screen, ordered. The main display showed empty space. There was nothing there, no station, no debris, just darkness. Scan for any trace of the station, she commanded. Scanning now, Commander. The officer worked his controls, then looked up with confusion. There is nothing, sir, not just no station, no anything. The stars that should be behind this position are gone too. Felt ice move through her blood. What do you mean gone? I mean they do not exist anymore. Look. He adjusted the display. The view pulled back, showing a larger area of space. And there, in the distance, was something that made no sense. A wall of absolute blackness. It was not a cloud or a nebula. It was not even truly dark because darkness implies the absence of light. This was the absence of everything: space, matter, energy, existence itself, a perfect void that stretched across the entire visible horizon. And it was moving. Slowly, steadily, it crept forward, erasing everything in its path. The unmaking, whispered. She had read Dr. Park's reports from, she knew what this was, but seeing it was different. Seeing it made her want to scream. Commander, what do we do? Gripped the rail in front of her. She was a warrior. She had fought battles across the galaxy. But how do you fight something that is not even there? We test it, she said. Launch a probe into the void. A small drone was fired toward the wall of nothingness. The entire fleet watched as it approached the boundary. For a moment, its signal remained steady. Then it crossed the edge. It did not explode. It did not malfunction. It simply stopped existing. One moment the probe was there. The next moment it had never been. No sensor data, the tactical officer reported. No energy signature, no debris. It is like the probe was never launched. Closed her eyes. 3,000 ships, the most powerful fleet in history, and they were completely useless. Pull back, she ordered. All ships retreat to safe distance. We need to think. While the fleet retreated, Dr. Park was still on, working desperately to decode more of the architect records. Every day, she learned something new. Every day, the countdown in the soul chamber grew smaller. Captain One had stayed with her, providing protection and support. He had become her closest friend in these dark months, a who believed in hope even when everything seemed hopeless. "I found something," said one evening, looking up from her studies with exhausted eyes. "The barrier the architects built. I understand how it works now." One leaned forward. "Tell me." "It is made of pure stellar energy. The architects built a network of collectors around 1,000 stars, channeling their power into a single focal point. That energy creates a wall between our reality and the unmaking. As long as the wall holds, the void cannot enter our universe." "But the wall is failing." "Yes, because it needs constant maintenance. The architects designed it to last exactly as long as their sleep. They calculated everything perfectly, but they could not predict every variable. The wall is breaking down faster than they expected." One's forearms crossed thoughtfully. "How long do we have?" Looked at him with fear in her eyes. "At the current rate of expansion, the unmaking will reach the core worlds in less than a year. After that, the entire galaxy will be consumed within a decade. And only the architects can rebuild the wall." "Yes, only they have the knowledge and the technology. The coalition could spend 1,000 years trying to understand their science. We do not have 1,000 years. We have months." One stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the blue forests have glowed peacefully. How many more months would they glow before the darkness took them? "The countdown in Seoul," he said. "How much time remains?" Checked her device. 87 days, just under 3 months. "Then we wait. And if the architects do not return in time?" One turned to look at her. His eyes were calm, accepting. "Then we die, but we die knowing that we tried. We die standing, not running." Felt tears form in her eyes. She had spent her whole life feeling like she did not belong anywhere. Half human, half, too different for both worlds. But now, at the end of everything, she had found purpose. She had found family. "I will not give up," she said. "Not yet. There must be something else we can do. Some way to slow the unmaking until the architects return." The answer came from an unexpected source. Grandmother Vass contacted 3 days later with urgent news. Deep in the forbidden archives, the ancient had found something that even she had forgotten existed. "A secondary barrier," Grandmother Vass explained. "Smaller, weaker. The architects built it as a backup in case the main barrier was ever damaged. It cannot stop the unmaking, but it might slow it down." "Where is it?" asked. "Hidden in a system at the Galactic Rim, a place called the Ember Cluster. The secondary barrier is inactive. It has not been used in 800,000 years, but if you can reach it and activate it, you might buy the galaxy precious time." Immediately contacted Commander. Within hours, a small task force was assembled. Captain One volunteered to lead the mission, insisted on going with him. "You are too important to risk," argued. "You are the only one who can read the architect language." "Then I am the only one who can activate the barrier," replied. "I have to go." There was no time for more argument. The task force departed that same day, racing toward the Ember Cluster, while the main fleet continued to monitor the advancing void. The journey took 2 weeks. Every day studied the instructions Grandmother Vass had given her. Every night she dreamed of the unmaking, of darkness swallowing everything she loved. When they finally reached the Ember Cluster, they found the secondary barrier station hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid. It was ancient, covered in the same shifting symbols as the chamber in Seoul, and it was completely dead. "The power systems have failed," reported the ship's engineer. "It would take weeks to repair them." Stared at the dark station. They did not have weeks. The unmaking was getting closer every hour. And then she felt something, a warmth in her chest, a voice in her mind that she did not recognize but somehow knew. She pressed her hand against the station's outer hull. The symbols began to glow. Energy flowed through the ancient metal, lighting systems that had been dark for ages. "How are you doing that?" one asked in amazement. "I do not know," whispered, but that was not entirely true. Some part of her did know, some part that had always been there, sleeping, waiting. Maybe she was more architect than she had realized. The secondary barrier activated with a pulse of light that could be seen across entire star systems. It would not stop the unmaking, but it would slow it, just enough, hopefully, for the architects to return. On Earth, the countdown continued. 52 days remained. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, 500,000 ships carried 8 billion sleeping souls toward home. And the race against extinction had begun. Part 5. The Return of the Architects. 8 months had passed since the vanishing. The galaxy hung on the edge of death. The secondary barrier had slowed the unmaking but not stopped it. Every week, another system fell into the void. Refugees flooded the core worlds in ships packed beyond capacity. Species that had been enemies for centuries now huddled together, united by fear. The countdown in Seoul reached 0 at exactly midnight, Earth time. Dr. Park was there when it happened. She had returned to the chamber beneath the city, waiting and hopping. Captain One stood beside her, along with a small team of coalition observers. Everyone held their breath. The pillar of light in the center of the chamber pulsed brighter. The symbols on the walls began to spin faster. A deep humming sound filled the air, growing louder and louder until could feel it in her bones. Then silence. For one terrible moment nothing happened. Felt despair crush her heart. Had they been wrong? Had the architects abandoned them? And then the sky opened. Not just above Seoul, but across the entire galaxy. Ships appeared everywhere at once. The 500,000 vessels that had left Earth 8 months ago, returning in perfect formation. But they were not alone. More ships emerged from hidden vaults across the stars, from hollow moons, from inside asteroids, from the hearts of dying stars. Ships that had been waiting for millions of years, activated by the signal that now echoed through every corner of space. When the count finally stopped, could barely comprehend the number. 12 million vessels, the full architect fleet. Commander received the reports on her bridge with tears streaming down her face. She was not someone who cried. She had not wept since her mother died 30 years ago. But this moment broke something inside her. Hope, that was what she felt. Real hope, for the first time since the outer silence began. "Communication incoming," her officer reported. "It is being broadcast on all frequencies, every channel in the galaxy." "Put it through." The main screen flickered and a face appeared. A human face. An older man with gray hair and calm eyes. He looked like a military officer, but there was something else in his expression. Something ancient and wise. "My name is Park," the man said. "Some of you may remember me as Admiral Park of the Korean Naval Space Command. But that was another life. A smaller life. A life I chose to live so that I could learn what it meant to be humble." The broadcast was going to every inhabited world. Billions of beings watched as the human spoke. "We are what we were. We are what we became. We are the architects and we are human. For 900,000 years we hid ourselves from the galaxy. We erased our memories, forgot our technology, and started over as primitive creatures on a small blue planet. We did this because we had grown too proud, too powerful. We had lost touch with what it meant to struggle, to hope, to fear." Admiral paused, his eyes filled with emotion. "Being human taught us those things again. We learned to love through weakness. We learned to hope through failure. We learned that true strength comes not from technology but from the heart. And now we return, not as conquerors but as protectors. Because the unmaking comes for all of us, and we alone know how to stop it. The message ended. Silence hung over the galaxy. Then slowly, responses began to come in. Ships signaling their support, governments pledging their cooperation, species that had feared the humans now reaching out with gratitude and relief. Captain One was the first to formally pledge his fleet to the architects. His voice cracked as he spoke. For too long, we have faced this darkness alone. Now we stand together. Whatever you need, the will provide. One by one, other species followed. Even the ancient. For the first time in history, the entire galaxy united under a single cause. The Battle of the Rim was about to begin. Doctor had been in Geneva. Now she remembered who she truly was. Architect, master engineer, one of the greatest minds to ever exist. She stood on the command deck of the engineering vessel Dawn's Light, surrounded by screens showing data from 1,000 star systems. Her job was the most important of all. She had to rebuild the barrier. The plan is simple in concept, she told her team. We need to channel the energy of 1,000 stars through the ancient gate network and focus it on a single point at the edge of the unmaking. That energy will create a new barrier, stronger than the old one. Permanent. Simple in concept, muttered one of her engineers. Impossible in practice. Smiled, nothing is impossible. It is just difficult. And we have been solving difficult problems for a very long time. The work began immediately. Across the galaxy, architect engineering teams activated stellar collectors that had been dormant for ages. Each collector was the size of a small moon, designed to harvest energy directly from a star's core. Getting them all synchronized would require perfect coordination. Meanwhile, Admiral led the defensive fleet to the Galactic Rim. 12 million architect vessels and 60,000 coalition ships formed a line between the unmaking and the rest of the galaxy. Their job was not to destroy the void. That was impossible. Their job was to buy time. The unmaking pressed forward, slow but unstoppable. Ships that ventured too close simply vanished. There was no explosion, no death, just nothing. Existence replaced by absence. Admiral watched from his flagship, the awakened Dawn. All ships maintain formation. Do not engage. We are here to hold the line, not to throw lives away. But holding the line had a cost. Every hour the void crept forward. Every hour the defensive fleet had to retreat a little further. And every hour Architect worked faster, trying to complete the barrier before there was nothing left to save. Dr. Park had been given a special role. Her unique heritage, half human and half, gave her abilities no one else possessed. She could interface with both architect and coalition technology. She could think in both languages at once. They needed her to be the synchronization point. The stellar collectors must fire at exactly the same moment, Architect explained. A difference of even a microsecond could cause a chain reaction that destroys half the galaxy. We need someone who can link all the systems together, who can feel the rhythm of 1,000 stars and bring them into harmony. And you think I can do that? Asked. Looked at her with eyes that held both pride and sadness. You were born for this. You are the bridge between two worlds, between what we were and what we have become. If anyone can do this, it is you. Thought about her life, all the years of feeling lost, of not belonging, of wondering why she existed. Now she knew. I will do it, she said. They connected her to the network. 1,000 threads of energy flowed into her mind, each one representing a stellar collector somewhere in the galaxy. The sensation was overwhelming. It was like hearing every voice in the universe at once. But slowly found the pattern. She felt the rhythm of stars being born and dying. She heard the song of galaxies spinning through the void, and she began to bring it all together. On the rim, the unmaking continued its advance. Coalition ships sacrificed themselves to slow its progress, flying directly into the void to buy precious seconds. Captain One's flagship was among them. "For all of us," he transmitted, just before his ship crossed the edge and ceased to exist. Felt his death like a knife in her heart, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Too many lives depended on her. The collectors reached alignment. The energy began to flow. And at the focal point, at the very edge of where reality met nothingness, something miraculous happened. Light exploded outward. A wall of pure energy, brighter than any star, pushed against the unmaking. For the first time in 8 months, the void stopped advancing. And then it began to retreat. The barrier was working. Reality was being restored. The unmaking was being pushed back beyond the edge of the galaxy, sealed away behind a wall that would last forever. Held the connection for 6 hours, her mind stretched to its limits. When it was finally over, when the last collector finished firing and the barrier locked into place, she collapsed. She woke up 3 days later in a medical bay, with architects sitting beside her. "Did we win?" whispered. Smiled, tears running down her face. "We won. The unmaking is contained. The galaxy is safe." Closed her eyes and felt peace wash over her. The darkness was gone. The future was bright. And somewhere in the stars, Captain One and all the others who had given their lives were finally at rest.